Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Gregory of Nyssa and Ecclesiastes. We're going to look at 112 to 26 and pages 29 to 40 in the commentary. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at our Greek concepts. And in 113, we read that Solomon chose to excavate the depth of reality, to investigate by way of wisdom, by way of Sophia wisdom, and excavation was kataskopto. So he wanted to dig into the depth of reality by way of Sophia wisdom, and he wanted to investigate Pantone Ginomai, all of being. And in 113b, he says that's a task given to us, and it's really a perispao. It's really a distraction in life. It really is just troublesome, he said. Because, in 114, because everything is metaiotes, everything is vanity, everything is purposeless, everything lacks meaning. And we are pragonuma, pushed around back and forth aimlessly by the emptiness of wind. And then in 115, he says that the diastrepho, that life that is distorted and perverted, uk epikaimai, it cannot be relied upon. We cannot rely upon an existence that is pure vanity. There's no reliability there. There's no meaning. There's no depth. We cannot rely upon that type of distorted existence. But he says he did seek out Sophia wisdom and gnosis knowledge, but it just brought painful awareness. Alema, painful awareness. So, kataskapo, excavating the depth of reality, just brought alema, painful awareness of vanity, and painful awareness of the diastrepho, distortedness of existence. A carnal life that deals in just the surface reality of pleasure and of accumulating possessions is a distortion of true life. And it does not bring meaning, it brings painful awareness. It brings a realization of the diastrepho, distortedness of existence. And it is a challenge. He said it was work, but he did take up that work of kataskopto, digging into the depth of reality, but everything in the realm of carnal living is vanity and vanity of vanities. So that's a look at the Greek concepts in first section. Let's take a look at the need to comprehend transcendence. The writer, and we don't know who the writer is, but he's writing about Solomon, but he says that he is speaking to the called out ones. He's speaking to those who have been called out of the world, out of, klesis, call. That's where you get Ecclesiastes. He's writing to the called out ones that have been called into fellowship with the living Lord. And he says that there has been a king set up in Zion, and that is Christ, the living Lord. Psalm 2, 6 and 7, you are my son, I have begotten you. It is Christ who proclaims the truth of God's precepts, not the carnal truth of vanity, but God's precepts are proclaimed by Christ. In Psalm 8:2 we read, his magnificence is exalted above the heavens, beyond the reach of our finite reason. Our finite existence is subject to non-existence, but God has given us the gift of free will, and that free will can be a free will that chooses to seek God's truth. But in 1:15, the author tells us that anything perverted, anything distorted cannot bring any kind of benefit to humanity. And in Hebrews 11:37, Paul spoke of being destitute and afflicted and the need to turn to Christ, because with Christ there comes the good shepherd to gather even the last stray sheep. Now Solomon, in chapter 2, he says he was unhindered in his pursuits of pleasure. He had the blessings of kingship. He was unhindered in any of his pursuits. And he pursued everything to the extreme, and it all came to vanity. It all came to no lasting significance. Fleeting things do not bring lasting significance or happiness. There needs to be a pursuit of meaningful existence, and that demands comprehension of transcendent reality. And not only that, but the practice of better discernment. And sometimes that is going to mean passing through sorrow or passing through suffering. Sometimes that becomes the conditional environment for learning. But he concludes in 2:6, perception versus madness. Giving ourselves over to finite pleasure is madness. It's destructive to the soul. It is destructive to our thinking. We need to be guided by a deeper vision of God's truth and God's faithfulness. We need to be guided by the faithfulness of Christ and guided by the truth of Christ, guided by Christ who is the way, the truth, and the life. In chapter 2, that's block 3, is the beginning of chapter 2, we're told, again, this teacher, unknown author, tells us we live in a climate of vanity. And that causes us shame. That causes us disgrace. We need to give attention to the soul's disposition. Solomon had been caught up in a vanity of carnal existence. Never denied what he wanted, but he denied the Lord his proper place, because Solomon's greed was never satisfied, and it resulted in condemnation. And the writer tells us that we should seek instead the illumination of God's truth. Divinity shines through truth and leads us to practice the ministry of agape. That will nourish our soul. We should walk in God's commandments. And we know the one commandment that Christ gave, he summarized all the commandments as love one another as I have loved you. In other words, the ministry of agape. Christ, at the Last Supper, left and gave the command, practice agape, self-giving love. Love one another as I have loved you. A life of pleasure and drunkenness leads to death of the mind, loss of virtue, and a life of disobedience. We step out of our limit. Instead, we should live for the divine living water of Christ, who will nourish our soul. Remember Christ at Jacob's well. I will give you living water. So Gospel of John, we should live from the living water promised in the Gospel of John as God has intended. So in this lesson, we learn first of all that Solomon did take up the quest for Sophia, wisdom, and gnosis knowledge. He did take up that quest. And he called it a kataskopto. He called it an excavation. He excavated to the very depth of reality, to the very depth of all being, and it was a task. He said it was a very difficult task, But after all of that investigation, he found that there was nothing lasting. There was no purpose. Everything was vanity and the vanity of vanities. He found nothing by way of his own investigation. In other words, it's going to take God's transcendence breaking in order to attain unto meaningful life. It's going to be that which is gifted from the living Lord God, not that which we ascend to, but that which descends to us through Christ. Solomon learned that as a difficult lesson here in these scriptures, and he called it kataskopto, excavation. And he did employ gnosis, he did employ Sophia, wisdom, and he was known as a wise king, but Solomon found life aimless. He found life vanity. He found that nothing truly satisfied the soul. Nothing had depth of meaning, because God and God's truth and meaning is unreachable by our own abilities. It is the Christ who descends to us, who empties himself of co-equality with the Father and descends to us. He brings the truth, he brings the way, he brings the life. It's only through rebirth that we reach the wisdom of God. So this lesson is about wisdom, but it's about the carnal wisdom of Solomon, and that was not beneficial. That was a perversion. That was a lack. It did not have any depth of meaning. And it all leads to the conclusion that we practice what Christ taught. Practice the ministry of agape, self-giving love. It concludes with that commandment. And that's what it means to walk in the commandments. It means walk in that one commandment given at the Last Supper. Love one another as I have loved you. Walk in the ministry of agape. Walk in the ministry of agape. And agape is self-giving love. That will bring about transcendence. That will transcend all knowledge at our level, because it will be truth from the Spirit of truth, from the Spirit of truth, the pneuma aletheia. And Christ promised the Spirit of truth to those who follow him in faithfulness. That'll wrap up the commentary from 29 to 40. We'll pick up in the commentary at page 41 next time. And we'll pick up in the scriptures at Ecclesiastes 2:7.